Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, can't believe I haven't watched these video parts yet because they're on American presidents and it's from Epic History TV, which I think is my favorite one, if not my favorite, one of my favorite history channels on YouTube to react to. And yeah, let's just get started. If you're ready to learn, if you're not ready to learn, you're in the wrong class. All right, home ec's down the hall. Make me a pizza, or just sit in the back and chill. That's fine. Let's go. I don't know enough about the presidents as I should, so maybe I'll make some comments, but I'm just not comfortable enough to make really big disagreements. Or actually, I don't even know what the premise of the video is.
As America prepares to elect its 45th president, this is Epic History TV's guide to the first 44 presidents.
Not the premise, but the...
George Washington, hero of the Revolutionary War and America's first president. Twice elected unanimously by the Electoral College, he steered America on a course of neutrality.
So there is a ranking. 4? I know that he wasn't really of the fighting of the direction that people wanted the country to go in. He didn't really seem to be in either camp and was a good placeholder for the presidency for the beginning of the country that allowed factions not to just tear each other apart at the beginning. So I don't know how much you can attribute that to how good his presidency was, but 4...
and stepped down after 2 terms. John Adams, lawyer, diplomat, and intellectual. He'd been one of the leading voices in the call for American independence. He avoided all-out war with France, was the first president to live in the White House, and the first to lose an election. Thomas Jefferson.
All-out war with France, the quasi-war. That sounds familiar. Okay, maybe I need to learn about that.
Chief author of the Declaration of Independence. He was a fierce defender of individual liberty, though, like several early presidents, himself owned slaves. He opposed federalism and strong central government, but doubled America's size by buying 800,000 square miles of territory from France. James Madison.
It's crazy. It shows you just how little early American leaders thought of enslaved people when they, while owning slaves, like said like liberty for all people, and not having that obvious like, but it's almost like, okay, wow, you
from France.
You thought that little.
James Madison. At 5'4", America's shortest president, but a towering figure in the fight to pass the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights.
Didn't he live to like 95?
He was forced to fight another war against Great Britain to uphold America's rights at sea. James Monroe, the last president who was also a founding father. He warned Europe not to meddle in American affairs, while promising the U.S. would not interfere in Europe's affairs. He passed legislation to restrict slavery to existing slave states and new territories south of the Missouri Compromise line. He also supported the colonization of Liberia by free African Americans, which is why its capital, Monrovia, is named after him.
Their flag also looks very much like another Virginia president, very much like ours. I think it is, I don't know how many red and white stripes it has, but in the blue upper left square, it has like one big white star. There are no Rhode Island presidents until me, when I become president.
John Quincy Adams, son of John Adams, America's second president.
I guess he was really
a brilliant
smart
diplomat who prioritized economic development while paying off most of America's national debt. Andrew Jackson.
Here he is.
A no-nonsense soldier.
Old Hickory? Oh, dang it.
Hero of the War of 1812 and founder of the Democratic Party. Once wounded in a duel, his authoritarian style caused his opponents, the Whigs, to brand him a dictator. he began a policy of forced relocation of Native American tribes
Trail of
to
Tears.
west of the Mississippi River.
I think the Trail of Tears
Martin
was just one example of this. It was just really extra horrific of how like many people died and how they extra.
Martin Van Buren, the first president born in an independent United States. Son of an innkeeper, he spoke Dutch at home. His presidency was dominated by America's first major financial crash. He served one term.
Wait, that's pretty cool. He was the first president who was born in the United States when it was the United States. So everyone before this was essentially born in Britain, or at least the British Empire.
Then lost 3 subsequent financial crash. He served one term, then lost 3 subsequent bids for re-election. William Henry Harrison, a soldier who spent most of his career fighting Native Americans. He gave the longest inaugural speech in history, but served the shortest time in office. 30 days after his speech, he died of pneumonia.
Guys, I'm not sure if it's him or like maybe like John Tyler, but one of these presidents has a living grandson. A living grandson. Living grandson of president. Is it I feel like it's John Tyler. Yep, it is, of John Tyler. Okay, so well I think he's going to come up. So you must ask yourself, like, where was this? How is that possible? Okay, so we'll wait till we get to John Tyler. Have we?
The first president to die in office. John Tyler.
Here he is. 10th president. He was president from 1841 to 1845, and he has a living grandson. When was he born? 1790. So he had a son, children. Oh God, I don't feel like I won't go through it. Here it is. Okay. Grandparents, John Tyler is an American chemical engineer. He's alive. He's 94 years old. I'm fast forward if you don't care about this. I just think this is crazy. And so John Tyler, the president, he had like one of his last children when he was, I think, in his 70s or something, with obviously a younger woman, probably in her 30s, 40s, or whatever. So when he was 70, he had like a child, and then that child lived long, and he had a kid like in his 70s or whatnot, and then that kid was born, and he's still alive. I think that's crazy.
First vice president to become president following the death of his predecessor. Expelled from his own party, the Whigs, for vetoing their bills, which he believed to contravene states' rights. James K. Polk.
When was your grandfather born? 1790.
A firm believer in westward expansion, he signed the law admitting Texas to the Union and provoked a war with Mexico, resulting in the acquisition of 500,000 square miles of North America, including California,
What about the
Nevada,
Gadsden?
and Utah. He also negotiated the division of Oregon with the British.
That's crazy. So he is responsible for not creating, but annexing or leading to the annexing of like half of the modern U.S.
Zachary Taylor, career soldier, hero of the Mexican War, had never voted before and held no firm political beliefs. With tensions rising between slave-owning and free states, he threatened to hang Southern secessionists, but died suddenly of a stomach illness. Millard Fillmore, born in a log cabin, the last Whig.
What did he threaten to do?
Tensions rising between slave-owning and free states, he threatened to hang Southern secessionists,
Okay.
but died suddenly of a stomach illness.
Crazy how far before the Civil War that, like, clearly the Civil War was not like a surprise thing. Like it was stuff heating up for decades.
Millard Fillmore, born in a log cabin, the last Whig president. He supported an uneasy compromise between free and slave states, which was to prove short-lived.
He's like one of my most like forgetful like if you were to ask me, like name a president that like no one's gonna know about. And the names that come to mind are like Chester Arthur and Millard Fillmore. Like random
States, which was to prove short-lived. Franklin Pierce took office shortly after he and his wife witnessed the violent death of their 11-year-old son, a trauma that likely left them both suffering from depression. He hastened the slide towards civil war by allowing brutal violence to engulf Kansas, where pro and anti-slavery settlers fought for control of the territory.
I bet you the next, I think the person after this, dang it, is Buchanan. And I think he's going to be either 42 of 43 or 43 of 43. I think Andrew Johnson and James Buchanan will probably be the bottom two. 42.
James Buchanan.
43 of 43. Wow. Oh, 42.
To
Andrew Johnson is going to be 43.
Mediate between northern free states and southern. James Buchanan. His attempts to mediate between northern free states and southern slave states failed abjectly, leading the Democratic Party to split and the southern states to leave the Union.
Crazy how he's like 42 of 43, like considered, at least by Epic History TV, and I'm sure a lot. That's like not necessarily anything he did that was bad, but like what he tried to do that failed, and like what he didn't do that's
Abraham
number
Lincoln,
one.
America's first Republican president.
Who's going to be number
led the North
one?
to victory in the Civil War and freed all Southern slaves by executive order.
Don't tell me FDR.
He was the first president to be assassinated, shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Andrew Johnson,
43.
a Southerner born into poverty. He sided with the Union during the Civil War. But after the war, he blocked Congress's attempts to impose reforms on the South. This led to his impeachment, though he was acquitted in the Senate by one vote.
He, from my limited knowledge, and I'm trying to learn more through videos like this, like it is the two worst presidents being the second worst being the one who basically did nothing to prevent the Civil War or failed miserably, and then the worst, the one after the Civil War, like directly after it, who like did absolutely nothing and made actions to stop efforts to, the whole point of freeing slaves is so that they can be free, and they've been slaves for generations, and to build them up, from slavery to, citizens, and he just stopped that from happening, which I can definitely see why those were the bottom two.
Ulysses S. Grant, Union hero of the Civil War. He used the military to enforce reconstruction of former slave states and protect those targeted by white supremacist violence in the South. His presidency also saw war against Native Americans in the Great Plains. Rutherford B. Hayes won the most disputed, corrupt, and violent presidential election in U.S. history. He sought to heal the wounds left by the Civil War and Reconstruction, but by withdrawing federal troops from the South, allowed white supremacists to regain power. James A. Garfield took on corruption in the Senate and civil service with some success.
Imagine just like if we had more wow, that was a bad voice crack. Competent people instead of Andrew Johnson and Hayes, of how much better off, race relations might be going forward. And you never know exactly. They still wouldn't have been good, but I'd imagine they'd been better if Hayes and Johnson were not Hayes and Johnson.
In power. James A. Garfield
Other Ohio.
took on corruption in the Senate and civil service with some success, but was shot by an embittered lawyer just 4 months into his first term and died of his wounds. Chester Arthur, son of an Irish Baptist preacher. Against expectation, he proved above political faction and continued Garfield's work of reforming government bureaucracy. Grover Cleveland, the first Democrat president since the Civil War, and the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He used the presidential veto with gusto, blocking measures he thought were beyond the remit of federal government, even pensions for Civil War veterans and subsidies for destitute farmers. Look out for Part 2 of U.S. presidents.
So you can only run again for a separate term if you only completed 1 term and then got voted out, and then you can run again. But if you serve 2 terms, you can't. And I think even if you're a vice president who has to step in because of an assassination, that if you serve like more than 2 years or something like that of the president that was assassinated's term, then that counts as a full term. If you serve more than 2 years, something like that.
Where we continue with America's 23rd president.
Cool. I just want to go right into it. We are going to go right into it. I got to pee quick, though. Be right back. All right, I'm back. We're good. Have places 1, 2, or 3 been taken yet?
Welcome to Part 2 of Epic History TV's guide to the first 44 presidents of the United States. We pick up with the 23rd president, Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of 9th President William Henry Harrison. His presidency saw federal peacetime spending pass $1 billion for the first time. He also passed laws to ensure fairer competition in business. Grover Cleveland. His second term was overshadowed by economic depression. The president offered little federal assistance and sent in troops to break a strike by the American Railway Union. William McKinley raised import tariffs to unprecedented heights to protect U.S. industry and waged war against Spain over Cuban independence. As a result, America gained the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Shortly into his second term, he was assassinated by a Polish-American anarchist, Leo Czolgosz. Theodore Roosevelt. At 42, the youngest ever.
Are they going to put FDR and Teddy Roosevelt at 1 and 2?
President. As vigorous at 42, the youngest ever president. As vigorous and energetic in office as he was in life, he broke up business monopolies, asserted U.S. power abroad, ensured completion of the Panama Canal, passed laws to protect national forests and parks, and won a Nobel Peace Prize for brokering a truce between Russia and Japan. William Howard.
Oh, really? In the Russo-Japanese War?
Brokering a truce between Russia and Japan. William Howard Taft. A distinguished judge, but not a natural politician. He achieved many reforms, but alienated progressive Republicans, including his former friend and ally, Theodore Roosevelt, who went off to form the Bull Moose Party.
Didn't this cause
The
Wilson
Republican
to
split
win?
handed the 1912 election to the Democrats. Taft later became Chief Justice of the United States. Woodrow Wilson, a former professor of political science.
Number 8. I see a lot of people, like I've seen some, like Mr. Terry History, Blogging Through History, Mr. Beat, all rank him very low. I thought he was going to be like 40 or something, but again, I don't know.
And Woodrow Wilson, a former professor of political science and the first Southern president since the Civil War. He passed progressive reforms at home, and after numerous
Southern, he's New Jersey.
German provocations, passed progressive reforms at home, and after numerous German provocations, led America into World War I. His vision for a new world order, with America playing a full part as a member of the new League of Nations, was blocked by a Republican Senate.
I do feel like, I was going to say this for McKinley, but I feel like with Wilson, whether or not it's Wilson, I feel like this is the start of America being like a, of being like a great power. It was a great, of being like, what am I saying?
Warren G. Harding.
Yeah.
He sought to roll back Wilson's wartime measures.
41.
But following his sudden death from natural causes, revelations emerged of extramarital affairs and cabinet corruption that destroyed his reputation.
Wow.
Calvin Coolidge, the son of a village storekeeper, moral conservative, and man of famously few words. He also believed in minimal federal intervention and is still held up as a role model by fans of small government.
Dang it. I was trying to remember a quote he said and I didn't listen. Massachusetts, though, almost Rhode Island.
He also believed in minimal federal intervention and is still held up as a role model by fans of small government. Herbert Hoover. Raised a Quaker, he was a successful engineer, humanitarian, and Secretary of Commerce. But his presidency was overshadowed by the Great Depression. Attempts to revive the economy included spending on major public works, but to little effect. Franklin D. Roosevelt, fifth cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, diagnosed with polio.
1 and 2. I don't know why I have an issue with that, but I do. Roosevelt. Okay, he led us through. How can he be above Lincoln? Who? All right. So he led us out of the Great Depression. I'm not even sure you can say he really did. I mean, clearly World War II. Clearly after FDR, we were way more powerful, but I think World War II did that to us. Made us more powerful and wealthy and whatnot. He did the Japanese internment stuff, which was crazy. And number 1.
Polio, aged 39. Cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, diagnosed with polio, aged 39. His package of economic measures helped lift America out of the Great Depression, while also improving federal treatment of Native Americans. Winning an unprecedented 4 elections, he led America to the verge of victory in World War II, dying in office just 3 weeks before Germany's surrender.
Oh my God, what was I going to say? Oh my God. Okay, yeah. I feel like Lincoln and Washington I have to put at 1 and 2 with my knowledge, because they were the only two to sort of like be the president going through an existential crisis for the United States that could like threaten the existence of the United States. One being the very beginning of the United States, where you had to set precedent, and the country was very torn between certain sides, and parties were developing. And then the Civil War, where Lincoln led us through, where I don't see World War II as a same level of crisis for us. Obviously, if you're Britain or France or Russia, that was a super big conflict that threatened your existence, but it didn't for us.
Harry S. Truman. Seeking a swift end to the Pacific War, he authorized the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Japan. At home, he passed progressive welfare and employment reform and prioritized civil rights. Abroad, he provided international leadership as the West entered a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander in Europe in World War II. He was approached by both parties to run for president. He was the first to be limited to 2 terms by a new constitutional amendment. He sought to contain the Soviet Union and de-escalate the Cold War.
I wonder why. Was it because of Roosevelt? They didn't want,
and oversaw a period of great American prosperity that included the construction of the U.S. interstate highway system. John F. Kennedy, the first Catholic president, and at 43, the youngest elected to office. He sought to instill America with renewed idealism, made some progress over civil rights in the South, and narrowly avoided nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, by Lee Harvey Oswald.
Everything I hear, the reason I hear that this president was good is his speeches and the stuff he wanted to do. When it comes to, I hear first, he wasn't that great on race relations. And 2, I could be wrong there too, he was the presidency that started the conflict in Vietnam that would eventually turn into what it became. It seemed like his dealings with Gorbachev and the Cuban Missile Crisis were not that great. We went from having missiles in Turkey and no missiles in Cuba to having missiles in Cuba and Turkey to then having no missiles in Turkey or Cuba. So all we did was lose a little bit of leverage. And I from what I've learned, that his meetings with Gorbachev, he didn't come across as very strong. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion, right? It seems like we survived through the Cuban Missile Crisis despite JFK. Maybe I'm wrong, but the more I don't understand why JFK is so high.
And narrowly avoided nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, by Lee Harvey Oswald. Lyndon B. Johnson. He enacted a wide-ranging package of reforms to address racial injustice and poverty. But frustration at the speed of progress was reflected by race riots in America's cities. Overseas, he continued to escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Richard Nixon withdrew U.S. troops from Vietnam and reduced tension with the Soviet Union and China. He became the first president to resign his office to avoid impeachment for his role in the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford granted Nixon a presidential pardon, then struggled with inflation and economic recession at home, while furthering detente with the Soviet Union. Jimmy Carter. He struggled with an energy supply crisis, inflation, and unemployment. Raised a Baptist, he championed human rights abroad, brokered peace between Egypt and Israel, and negotiated a treaty giving control of the Panama Canal to Panama. But his popularity was greatly damaged by the Iran hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan, former Hollywood actor, and at 69, the oldest elected president. His tax
this doesn't include Joe Biden
cuts and
Trump,
free market reforms were
Obama.
credited with revitalizing the U.S. economy. He launched America's war on drugs, began an arms race with the Soviet Union, which he described as the evil empire, and supported anti-communist insurgencies around the world. George Bush, a decorated...
Ever seen the Rambo 2? Rambo 3, actually? It's so funny. Like, we call it freedom fighters until they fight us, and then they're terrorists. Oh, God. Like, the Rambo 3 did not age well.
World War II
War hero, George Bush.
George Bush, a decorated World War II Navy pilot, later director of the CIA. He oversaw America's response to the collapse of the Soviet Union and sent American troops to liberate Kuwait during the First Gulf War. Bill Clinton.
I feel like I'd love to have him as president today, just because, like, Biden has a lot of experience, but not nearly as much of experience as George Bush in a more variety of ways. I mean, Joe Biden's been, senator, vice president. So is, George, Bush has been was vice president under Reagan. But, like, in a time of, like, military uncertainty and, like, crisis abroad, I feel like having someone like him would be really, like, if I could, like, pull a president out of my pocket to, like, throw it in today just to, like, feel a bit safe and feel like, okay, this guy, he was in World War II as a voice crack pilot, he vice president, CIA stuff. Just seems like a super competent guy that didn't seem very controversial or polarizing, and just, I'd feel safe.
Bill Clinton. His presidency saw a period of peace and prosperity, low unemployment, and falling crime. He became the second president to be impeached following the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but was found not guilty by the Senate. George W. Bush. Following the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but was found not guilty by the Senate.
Not guilty. Like, I agree that, like, here's the thing, like, a classic example of an impeachment that I'm like, you did break the law, but, like, you had an affair and you lied about it. And you lied about it directly. Like, that's the weird thing. It's like, I don't care what you're lying about. The fact that you can lie just like that and look at it. But I feel like he's guilty of a crime that I don't think you should be removed from office from, which is why I think it was a good thing not to make him guilty in impeachment.
George W. Bush, son of George Bush. His presidency was shaped by the 9/11 terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. America's subsequent war on terror led the U.S. to become embroiled in long, costly operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Barack Obama, the first African-American president. He passed an economic stimulus package to soften the impact of the 2008 financial crash, and an Affordable Care Act to improve access to medical insurance. American forces continue to have a presence in Afghanistan and Iraq, where they help to tackle the new threat of ISIS. Now, all 44 U.S. presidents, according to their ranking in the Siena Research Institute survey of 2010.
So the survey was only conducted halfway through Obama's presidency.
Andrew Johnson, James Buchanan, Warren G. Harding, Franklin Pierce, George W. Bush, Millard Fillmore, John Tyler, Herbert Hoover, William Henry Harrison, Benjamin Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Jimmy Carter,
I think we can go a little bit.
Rutherford B. Hayes, Richard Nixon, Calvin Coolidge, Gerald Ford, James A. Garfield, Ulysses S. Grant, Chester Arthur, William Howard
I want
Taft,
to see the top 10 again, but
Martin
I'm
Van
gonna-
Buren,
right there.
George Bush, William McKinley, Grover Cleveland, John Quincy Adams, Ronald Reagan, John Adams, Lyndon B. Johnson, Barack Obama, Andrew Jackson, Bill Clinton, James K. Polk, John F. Kennedy, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Harry S. Truman, Woodrow Wilson, James Monroe, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt.
So interesting. Where would I disagree? As if I have, but what I do appreciate about this video is that it doesn't seem to like hold. It doesn't seem to be a very conventional. It doesn't seem to be it seems to be a list that like you wouldn't see a lot of people put together, and I think that's a good thing because you know, I think if people just always put the same presidents and they always get like confirmed as the top 3, 4, 5 or the bottom 5, then you could just accept that and not continue to learn about them and the other presidents. But ones that surprised me, Teddy Roosevelt. Well, definitely. Where's George Washington? Jesus Christ. Oh, he's number 4. Okay. Wilson. A lot of people hate Wilson, and I'm sure would put him in the bottom. JFK. I've yet to be. I don't get why he's there. In my opinion, he would be like down here or something. I don't know enough. Polk, obviously, a lot of people, or a lot of land taken for the U.S. Really interesting. I think George Bush would be a good president. The dad, you know, the first one. Interesting video. Would appreciate any comments, guys. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you guys next time.